You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, December 24th, 2021.
Hey, that's I think that's a holiday.
Is it? Here's one way to tell. Do you have to work on Friday?
No.
Oh, well then it must be.
Well, that's not a great example. Actually, who knows? Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't work.
All I know, Andrew, is that I am rich.
Rich with love?
No. Rich with perhaps the money of nerds with nostalgia and money to spend. So, yes, let me tell you a little story. I got a box. So, we were going through a storage unit that my mom has when we were last summer when we were back down there, and we found boxes of like old VHS tapes. Like, yeah, sure, we'll take them and like we'll see if there's anything here of value or whatnot, and we can either like sell them or junk them or whatever. And I actually found in one of these boxes a sealed copy of the original 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie, unopened, pristine condition. I should get it graded and boarded and sell it through the Heritage Auction House, because man, I went on eBay. I can get anywhere from like $50 to like $700 for a VHS tape. I'm like, the only way that price is, and I should say that's not just what people are listing them for. I made sure to look at like how much has a sealed copy of the TMNT movie sold for, and yeah, somewhere around like $500-$700. I'm like, that's stupid. Come on, people.
Well, so I will say the local nerd bar that they had a VHS player. They still do, I think, and they actually will buy nerdy and kind of geeky VHS when they see them like at places, Goodwills and shit.
Right.
And actually, I think they have a copy of that, although it's obviously not new in box because they play it. And it's just wild that some VHS are worth nothing, right?
Right.
Nothing. The idea that someone paid, and it's probably just because, if when you find it, you find it. And if that's what you want, a new in-box sealed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie. Unfortunately, that's collection, right? That's,
hey, if I can make a profit, that's all that matters.
Oh yeah, no, good for you.
I mean, don't forget, like, I'm nostalgic for the movie, but I got the Blu-ray, so I don't need this.
Right.
It makes me think of like, if we ever end up in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, like these will have zero value unless we figure out how to play magnetic tapes.
No, actually, they'll have all the value because we'll have lost the cloud. So the only thing we'll have are VHS cassettes.
Right, so there we go. It's the currency of the post-apocalyptic future.
Like there's trading. It's not bottle caps Fallout. It's VHS cassettes.
Right, man, and that's a problem because those are bulky.
They're bulky and they degrade.
That's why Betamax should have won the war. But speaking of winning the war, Andrew, this week we want to do for this sort of holiday episode, quote unquote, another week in geek.
Oh my gosh, what a surprise!
That is our gift to you, dear listeners. So, Andrew, if you don't mind starting, what was your week in geek like this week?
All right. So this is I watched, I talked about a TV show last week. I watched another TV show recently. And actually I've been watching lots of TV shows, not lots, but a few. I mean, there was the new Disney show Hawkeye. I did watch that, but I'm not going to talk about it.
I'm getting there.
But I did watch another show that kind of popped up on my TV, on my Paramount Plus.
Oh, another Star Trek show?
No. Although I'm watching that too. Star Trek Discovery Season 4. I did watch the first half of Star Trek Prodigy Season 1. However, the show I'm talking about, and this is going to be weird, and I know like everyone listening is going to immediately wonder, and how old is Andrew when I say this? I know that because I think it myself, and when I told Dan what this was going to be about, he said, how the fuck old are you? I watched the new CBS show, CSI Vegas.
The new CBS show?
Yeah, the new CBS show. So in, I think, September, maybe, they premiered a new show called CSI Vegas. It is it's basically a reboot, not a reboot. It's a continuation of the original CSI, or I'm sorry, I gotta get the show. There were 3 shows, right? And I have to, the names, it was CSI Miami, CSI New York, and the original show was CSI Crime Scene Investigation.
And that took place in Vegas, didn't it?
It took place in Vegas. So CSI Vegas is basically a sequel to that original show. And it's a 10 episode season. Probably the first season they'll probably get, I don't know, they'll probably get renewed. Who knows? I mean, they have a twist at the end, like, oh, and next season's going to involve something else, But what's interesting about this is, unlike the original show. So for context, why is Andrew watching this? Because starting around 2004, I started watching CSI. As it ends up, anyone that's listened to what I talk about, right? I watch Leverage. I watch all this. Like, I like procedural shit. And I like competence porn. I like when these guys do the thing really well and they and there's a process to it and you kind of see some of the process and it's kind of like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I think I probably got my big start watching CSI because it was different enough that it wasn't something I knew. I didn't know anything about Magneto, whatever bullshit, or Luminol, right?
Got me excited for a second.
It was neat it was neat for me to watch. And I watched them all. I mean, there's a point where there are 3 CSI shows on at once. I was watching all of them, although always a year behind because I get them on DVD.
Right.
I haven't had cable since.
Another way to age yourself, Andrew.
Well, at least I didn't say VHS, right? But actually, because I remember I went out to sea on USS Alabama in 2004, and I had a little DVD binder thing. And inside, I had one that was literally just a bunch of discs of CSI. Because it was I had 6 seasons across the 3 shows or something. It was and those are 24 episode seasons. So that was just a shit ton of discs. And I remember because the captain of the submarine I was on was like, hey, can I watch that CSI Miami shit? Because he hadn't seen it. And so he burned through it, in his spare time out to sea. Right.
I'm trying to think of a cool pun so I could put my sunglasses on. But I can't think of one.
Right.
I mean, but actually, you speak to something that's interesting. Thinking back, the late 2000s, early 2010s was a peak for procedurals, right? Obviously, all the CSIs, all the NCISs, and the things like Bones and Castle and all these procedural shows that were just kind of dominating the airways. And because I remember hearing NCIS for years was the original NCIS was the most watched show in America or something like that. And I'm like, really? But I think it just speaks to the power of that genre. During that time period of, I would say probably about 10 years, probably more, that I feel it's kind of, I mean, they're still out there, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's 72 NCISs, right?
Right. What was the other one? The James Spader Blacklist. They're all coming back to me now. Just like Celine Dion once said. I watched a lot of them too. I really liked. I think I watched all of Bones. I really enjoyed that show for what it was worth. It's a powerful medium, and so yes, I made fun of you, but I made fun of you because I relate.
So I watched a lot of these. Actually, I mean, CSI, the original, was also the longest running because the other 2 got canceled. I think, because I remember there's a period where Lawrence Fishburne was on CSI, and then after Ted Danson was on it.
Oh, really?
Right? They kept
definitely the bad place.
They definitely started kind of trying to do that, cycle out all the cast, which for a show like that would work, and it did. I mean, they were on I bet you if you look, it was probably 10 years, 12 years of CSI.
Right.
So anyway, this new show comes out, and for context, it is a new cast mostly, right? The idea is it is 20 years later, 10, but they do bring back 2 of the original stars of the early years. William Peterson, who had played the head of the crime lab or whatever, Gil Grissom, and then another a woman, Georgia Fox, who played. God, I feel bad if I'm mispronouncing that because it's one of those names where you think you know how to say it, and it's probably totally different. But anyway, she played one of the investigators who end up leaving the show together, getting married, and being a happy, scrappy couple. So, and that was 6 years in of the 12-year run, right? So the whole premise is the show opens with it's Las Vegas 2021. And we see it opens actually with one of the other stars of the original show, the guy who was the cop supervisor, the actual licensed officer or whatever.
Right.
And someone comes in and basically tries to kill him. And he stops him and whatever. And it kind of opens this door. Oh, why is someone trying to kill this old cop? But it opens the door into this investigation that reveals, I think it's at the end of the first episode, a storage unit that is full of evidence from crimes in the 2010s and the 2000s.
Oh.
In stuff related to one of the technicians from the original series. And the idea that he's been falsifying evidence back when he worked for the crime lab, and that thousands of cases were falsified by him. So that's the premise, is like, oh my gosh, bad cop. So of course, naturally, when you have an officer, and I'm going to call them officers because they carry badges and guns a lot of the time. Like, I don't know what the distinction is, so I'm just going to call them officers.
Right.
So what, like this premise, oh my gosh, an old officer was bad, right? That's what it looks like. And we have to investigate it. And he may be responsible for thousands of people being wrongfully imprisoned by the state of Nevada. Okay, that sounds like, oh, that could be interesting, right? Do the science, do the whatever. And because it's the bad guy, the purported bad guy is one of the originally unlikable guys, but eventually I think he kind of like, oh, he's all right. He's like the grumpy weird one. You assume, okay, he's probably not bad, but gosh, what if it's another cop that's framing him? Something like that. So I watched this show because that's it. And of course, naturally, like when you have an investigation like this, you're gonna see where I'm going to start to sour real quick. What do you naturally do?
Should we put a spoiler tag here?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna spoil this whole damn season, so you don't have to watch it.
Thank you for your service.
So naturally, when you have the possibility of a law enforcement officer who's engaged in inappropriate behavior that illegal behavior that resulted in people wrongfully arrested and imprisoned, naturally bring in his two old supervisors to investigate. Like that's the first thing they do. You're like, what?
Right.
And of course, they even realize that that's a little bit sketchy. So they have them doing cases that aren't this case, except they're related to this case, right? It's like, what? So already we're off to a good start. And as the show goes on, they kind of start to suggest, oh, maybe there's something going on. And they start to find out, oh, well, there's actually other people that maybe this is falsified, right? This guy didn't do it. Okay, sure. We expect that. And as it goes on and they start pulling the string. Now, meanwhile, we have also the monster of the week, right? We have like, oh, here's just some random case, like the show does. So there's an ongoing story and there's the monster of the week. I know that's not the case of the week, whatever. You get what I'm saying. But they start pulling at this, like, oh, maybe it's actually this guy that's not in the crime lab. Maybe it's this dude. And oh no, maybe it's not him. Maybe he was working for someone. Well, maybe it's this other person. And I shit you not, by like episode 6 or 7, it's a defense attorney who's suing the state for basically for all these people that were wrongfully imprisoned. That's who they implicate is the bad guy. And it's because he wants to, he wants to make some money or something. And the real story is he's actually just like a dipshit. And by the way, it is him. It is him. It is a defense attorney who's one of his arguments is he's so upset about these CSIs because in his mind, who wins in court is the person that has the better story. And these CSIs ruined it by bringing evidence in. And I'm like, what the fuck, right? And then it's also because he's going to make a huge amount of money suing the state on behalf of these people that are wrongfully imprisoned and stuff like that. And of course, as the attorney, he's going to take a cut. And he's got like other, third-party analysts and stuff, people that do evidence investigation for defense attorneys. They're all in on it. Like there's this big, it's like it's conspiracy. He's manufactured all this evidence that suggests this guy faked shit. And eventually he ends up like actually kidnapping him and threatening his life and basically saying, you're going to die because I need you to die to sell this story. It's so absurd. So this goes from, oh my gosh, what about this story about like there could have been a bad cop and how does the department deal with it? It turns into, oh no, the defense attorney is really a bad guy. It literally is so bad. He's willing to harm all these people. I mean, I think he literally blows a guy up to cover his tracks, right? With like a grenade or some shit. Like, holy crap. So this show, and by the way, along the way, we see lots of evidence of the Las Vegas crime lab behaving irresponsibly. We see we see crime scene investigators basically demanding to search without a warrant, and when being told to bring a warrant, they threaten them with public shame, basically, because it's like a sex club. Say, well, if you make us get a warrant, we're going to show up with a news crew. And it's like, fuck you. Fuck you. All right. Okay. So they have that. They also have, let's see. Oh, when they find out that the state attorney general or whoever it is that's leading this investigation, they're going to move all the analysis to another county's lab, right? Okay. Like they should. Don't have the lab that's potentially got bad people in it doing the analysis of the bad people. They're like, no, we got to fight that. We got to do it. Hell, they even start doing secret stuff on the side. They're like literally taking shit home. Or to their hotel room, because the two superstars are like, they're living in a hotel, like you do in Vegas. They're like taking stuff to, like, he's literally bringing crime scene equipment to his hotel so he doesn't do it in the lab. At one point, the head of the criminalistics team gets put on leave because they find out how fucked up they're running this lab. And what does she do? She continues the investigation on her own. Like, she goes and starts snooping people. And I'm like, holy shit. Everything about, and I realize I've changed a lot in 20 years because I guarantee this kind of shit has been happening in police procedurals forever, right? It's just so much more obvious, especially because it started with the idea that, oh, maybe there is a bad cop or bad crime scene investigator. No, of course not. They're all great. The real bad guy are the defense attorneys. So I watched CSI Vegas and, like, hey, It was exactly what it says on the tin. I guess what really was the shock for me. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like at times I had fun with it. Like the kind of some of the stuff is the same weird, absurd shit that they've always done. Like it's like the kind of thing where one of the writers will read about some weird shit and then write an episode about it.
Right.
I think the difference is now I've seen that done better in something like Leverage, where like when they do, like, they actually do the research and they do the work, as opposed to, I saw an article about, like, the original CSI had a transsexual episode where it really felt like someone had read an article about transsexuals and then wrote this whole episode about weird shit, or the episode about furries and plushies, or like someone had read an article about it and then wrote this whole episode that's like not really accurate.
I think in a tradition started by Law and Order, where it's like, these are shows that feature stories ripped from the headlines, but what they're leaving out is that they only read the headlines.
They only read the headlines. It was interesting to watch. It wraps up at the end of the season. They end up finding the guy. I mean, and again, there's some weird, like there's a whole shtick about casino fragrance. Like there's like a 20-minute scene about specialized casino fragrance, and that's literally how they like try to figure out where someone's being held prisoner, because they have like a sample of it. You're like, oh, this is weird. But that stuff was kind of neat. And the characters, like the cast, they're all fine. Like they have neat characters that, and they have some, some silly episodes. I just that premise in the background, I just think, a friend of mine, when I commented on like how appalled I was that like in the third episode they're like threatening someone who doesn't allow them to search without a warrant, he said, well, yeah, but CBS has always been kind of like the propaganda network, and I realized every time I go on Paramount Plus it's like, hey, do you want to watch Blue Bloods with Tom Selleck, which is like, I mean, that's not even, it just says propaganda on the tin.
It's funny, like changing the ending there, or like changing the expected ending, especially if you want to talk about ripped from the headlines kind of stuff. Like there are topics to probe, even without adding the, as you're insinuating, without adding the defense attorney angle. It reminds me of kind of like, maybe they were like, well, that's cliche. Everybody would expect that, right? And it reminds me of when they changed the villain in Sum of All Fears.
Oh, to
Nazis. It's like, oh, guys, you're trying too hard.
Although comically now, that's also,
I know, right?
Except those Nazis were way too organized. So, and that's, I think that was the, my takeaway was that they instead of kind of basing it on something that is a little bit like what we see, I mean, I always joke that there's an attorney, Greg Doucette on Twitter, who has a whole thread of multiple threads of basically police engaging in violence, police falsifying evidence, and it's just news stories from around the country in the last couple of years. Like, they could do these things and have this idea of, oh, there was someone bad. Not everyone, and they could even push the not everyone's bad, right? They don't need to take on the institutional problem. It's just a fucking TV show. But instead, they like lean the other way. They like, it's literally no cop is bad. No cop can be bad. The problem is actually these other people. They're literally, and the takeaway I got at the end is that any implication that the police are bad is a manufactured conspiracy by selfish people, right? That was the story. And I'm not trying to say they're trying to, that's what they want you to take away, but that's literally the story they said, right? And it was just so shocking to get to. I mean, it wasn't shocking though. As it was happening, I'm like, of course this is what's happening, right? Right. Of course.
You're like, you might have been able to predict it, but you're not surprised by it.
Right. In fact, I was just my own naivete that I was hoping they were going to go with, like, again, it doesn't have to be the lovable character, because even in the first 2 episodes, Gil Grissom, his whole thing was always, oh, I follow the science. He's not convinced that the guy is innocent. So you're like, wow, this is interesting. And they're like, oh, except no, of course it's a bad. And what's the one thing they have? Literally, when they think this defense attorney might be a bad guy, they just start stealing his garbage, right? These are technically like whatever the hell they are, or consultants. I don't know. They're stealing.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean,
different states have different rules about what's allowed with garbage.
Oh, you know what happens in Vegas.
But it's amazing that it shows, and they have the whole scene where she goes to the guy's house and she's literally pulling his garbage out of the garbage can off the street,
right? And
going to drive off to the hotel to do science on it.
It's like, because I think even normal protocol, they still have a detective or something do like procure the garbage. It reminds me of a show I've talked about on here before, Big Sky, which is about this private detective agency. These 2 private eyes, but in the show they have so much. Apparently in Montana you have so much leeway as a detective where you can just run and gun into a house, guns blazing, and like the state troopers show up and go like, yeah, you did good work here. I'm like, what? No, they're private investigators. What are you talking about? To the point where like the FBI shows up, is like, Giles, can you help us out? And I'm like, what do you mean by help us out? By going into the door with you with guns out. I'm like, come on. But that's part of the fantasy, I guess, right? Just people overstepping their bounds and having it be okay.
Yeah, and it was just such a thing for me to come back to this show that I remembered really enjoying. And I mean, again, looking back, they did all sorts of bad stuff, but my recollection of the show was like, it was universally about like, hey, we're gonna make like a putty thing and shoot it with guns to see how, like it was all this stupid science shit was the focus, not, can we strong arm people into letting our cops run rampant. And of course the fun part is when they do that thing of like, oh, like the one scene where they basically force the sex club to let them investigate without a warrant. They don't find anything. Right. Awesome. Or at least they don't, they have to like, it has to go into this fucking rabbit hole to find something relevant, and it's like, this idea of like, let's just show cops. And of course it's okay because it's a sex club, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Or whatever. But either way, that like as a viewer, it's okay because this audience doesn't like sex clubs, It'd be one thing if it were like a nice old lady's house.
Right.
But then she'd let them search anyway because she's innocent, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway. We live in a post-science world, Andrew, so don't expect it anymore on a show called CSI.
Yeah, well, But hey, music by The Who. So,
there we go. Oh, still. Well done.
The opening theme. Yeah, it's the same one. Which I'll joke. The other thing that those shows did for me is actually like got me listening to The Who. So, hey, it could be worse.
That does make the winter solstice gift I was going to get you a little more awkward now. I guess I could send this DVD box set back to Amazon of the new season.
Collected all CSI on DVD box set.
It's the thought that counts, right?
Not in that case. But yeah, anyway. So that was my Week in Geek. So I hope, obviously if you're listening to this and you're really looking forward to see it, first of all, if you were really looking forward to it, you already watched it. But if you thought like, hey, that new show, it's a skipper. Or you could watch it just to understand what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
I mean, apparently season 2, if they make it's going to involve a serial killer. Ooh, I want to see how the CSIs violate constitutional rights to solve that one.
Right. As if serial killers still exist at this point anyway. But...
Well, of course, the fun thing, if they, they've done it before, that William Peterson was in the original Manhunter.
Right.
Playing the investigator. So, it's any chance to make a joke about that is okay by me.
And he wears very short shorts in that movie. Oh my goodness. It is an 80s movie through and through.
But anyway, that was my week in Geek, Dan. What about you?
I've been real busy with day job stuff, but I've been poking and prodding. Oh, that sounds weird. At various things. I have started Hawkeye. I've also started. I was reading the comic. It was quote unquote based on. It's totally based on. Those creators should get their names in the credits. Oh my goodness, it's ridiculous. And that's been good so far. I have actually I don't think I talked about this on the show. I have now watched 2 episodes of the live action and canceled Cowboy Bebop Netflix show. I've been enjoying it.
Well, it's too bad, right? Given that it's canceled.
I mean, I could talk about that. Well, let me just get into that real quick. Like, I think the thing that actually made me, I didn't dislike the first episode. I thought the biggest, not the biggest surprise, but one of the surprises for me is that obviously the original show, if you don't know, is an anime TV series that the episodes ran for, they're half-hour episodes, right? Which tend to be the par for the course for a lot of animated series. And for the live-action show, they made them hour-long episodes. I'm like, okay, so maybe they're blending stuff together. And not even really expecting a faithful adaptation, because I don't need that. I'd rather them do something that works well for the medium, which generally you could say that they failed at. But it was with the second episode that, for some reason, I was able to disconnect my brain, or the part of my brain that's like, okay, what are they doing that's like the show? What are they doing that's different? What are they doing that's like the original? What are they doing that's different? And just kind of like push the animated version out of my head and just like almost approach this like, what if I didn't know that this was an adaptation? What if I didn't know? What if I just came upon this thing as it was? And that actually made me enjoy it a lot more. I'm like, this is like, yeah, it's not maybe, it's a letdown in terms of an adaptation of a very stylistic anime. But on this weird show on its own is incredibly stylish, incredibly weird, and incredibly bold in a lot of ways, and made me actually more interested to continue watching the series. But I've only watched 2 episodes. Maybe it all falls apart.
Yeah, at the end of the first season.
Yeah, but it's a mess. It's a weird show. Again, even if people didn't know it was based on anything, I don't know how appealing it would be, because it is really wacky. But that aside, the thing I want to talk about tonight, or today, whenever you're listening, you don't have to listen to the show at night, dear listeners, is I've read another book from Boss Fight Books. I think it was in October, maybe at the beginning of November, they had like a 50% off sale. So I bought a couple books that I've been meaning to check out. One was on Super Mario Brothers 3, and the other was on Mega Man 3. Oh, I didn't even see the pattern there. But
threes, all threes,
both threes.
Okay, I'm sorry, but there's going to be a point in when you're watching Star Trek: The Next Generation that me saying all threes is going to resonate. And you're like, oh my god, Andrew just made a really
deep cut. For
those listening, Dan is very slowly watching through Star Trek: The Next Generation for the first time. So. Hey, just wait for season 6. That's all I gotta say.
You will be waiting for me to watch season 6.
Yeah, for like 2 years.
Right. So I read through the Super Mario Brothers 3 one, and it's by, I might mispronounce it, it's either Alyse or Alyse Knorr. It was good. I think it's actually an early book in the Boss Fight Books run. It's number 13. Another 3. If anything, it reinforces, especially since it's an early book in the run of Boss Fight Books, it really does establish, or it doesn't establish, but it really clearly shows kind of the approach that a lot of writers have to these books that are published in this run. So if you don't know, Boss Fight Books is a publisher that publishes books about specific video games. They're games, these are books that are pitched to the company by aspiring writers or currently employed writers in the video game world who want to write about this video game, but it's not wholly a critical analysis of the game, and it's not wholly just an essay doing an investigation of how the game was created or interviewing creators. It's not even a look necessarily at the cultural impact of the game. It's all those things.
I mean, each book is its own
Indeed
thing.
But I think generally from what I've read of and I think I've read about 4 or 5 now, aside from a couple outliers, they tend to be books where they do some historical investigation, do some critical analysis of theme, gameplay, and the connection between those things, and also like personal history in a way, especially because a lot of these games are old, and people are probably writing about these games because they have a personal connection to it. And so there's a lot of these books have like a sort of a frame narrative of, oh, I played, I remember playing this as a kid. I remember the Final Fantasy V book was kind of like that. Like part of that book was about the history of the translation of that game. Right.
Except that I mean, just not in defense of it, but his personal involvement with Final Fantasy V was actually like a big deal because he was, part of a vector of how most Americans before the official release in English played the game.
Right. I think that was Chris Kohler that wrote that book.
I believe so. And then, one of the other books is written by Spelunky. The book is actually written by the creator of the game. Right. So it's a wide swath is what I'm trying to say of what they're doing. Right.
And other, like the Shovel Knight does none of that. It's basically like an embedded reporter who talks about the creation of Shovel Knight. And so it's not like, oh, I grew up with Shovel Knight because it's a fairly new game. This book, Super Mario Brothers 3 is definitely in the classic sort of boss fight books mold of biography mixed with critical analysis mixed with history. As it's all framed around Alyse or Alyse growing up playing the game with her father, and then in between those sort of flashback moments we get looks at the creation of the music of the game, which is always kind of fun. Look at sort of the design choices that Shigeru Miyamoto made to distinguish it from previous Super Mario Brothers game. We also get a history of sort of the Super Mario Brothers franchise, diving into stuff that I kind of already knew, but it was nice to see it written with, sourced, sources. Talking about Japanese Super Mario Brothers 2 versus Super Mario Brothers 2 USA versus like why is Super Mario Brothers 3 so different, right? Mm-hmm. If anything, like I said, like the book didn't reveal a lot of stuff new to me, so it wasn't, I hate to say this wasn't the most engaging book I've read in the series, but it was cool to kind of look at the beginning of this publisher, like the beginning run of this publisher, and see kind of not necessarily what this writer has to say about the game, but also seeing what this book is saying about this the sort of the ethos of boss fight books, right? Mm-hmm. As ever, like it's really good research, really good writing, just in general, a really good look at a game that, again, it's the one thing I took away from it was thinking about, since the book is framed around her context with the game, it made me think about what the game means to me, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't think about Super Mario Bros. 3 every day, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably like, it is probably my favorite Mario game, right? Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder, like, why? And to think of how weird it is, everything from like its own framing narrative of being almost framed like a play. If you remember, the game opens up with literal stage curtains, right? Leading to fan theories about like, are any of the Mario games actually real, or is it all just productions, for lack of a better word, which actually is covered in the book. Hold on, let me see here. Yeah. In a Nintendo UK Mario Maker promo video released in the fall of 2015, Miyamoto finally confirmed for the world the truth behind the Super Mario Bros. 3 theater theory, and all without saying a word. In response to the question, quote, was Super Mario Bros. 3 all just a performance, end quote, Miyamoto, who remains silent throughout the entire video, thinks for a moment and then nods vigorously, a small sly smile spreading across his face. He's performing the answer, of course, just as he's performing his role as a kind of Nintendo company mascot in the promo video. So it's presenting also the creator of this series as like this weird character in his own right. I think he's a lot like H.P. Lovecraft in that case. Like, he's just making the shit up as he goes along. There's no lore here, right?
Well, I mean, it's funny because, like, yeah, I mean, you look at Mario, like, there's no canon,
Right,
like when did Mario Party 1 happen with respect to Super Mario Galaxy? Was it before or after? There's not, and it's why, and they're never going to do that. Unlike with Zelda, where like the realization that actually there's probably enough bullshit that we should say something.
Like they bend over backwards to try to make everything fit. Like it's so.
Whereas Mario's like, there's not even like what's the canon? Like, yeah,
they can't even agree where is Mario from this place or is he from New? Like it's not like even Mega Man 2. Sometimes you get like a little, in 20XDX, Dr. Light created it's just like, hey, what's up? I'm in a pipe.
Yeah, well, I think the idea of him being from Earth is explicitly the movie, right? Like,
heck, yeah.
or the Super Mario Brothers Super Show starring the Captain Lou Albano.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
but
like I said, it's well researched. It's not maybe because I've read enough Wikipedia articles, read enough interviews, read enough historical takes or looks at the series. I didn't learn anything new, but it's a nice piece of reference because she does go into depth looking at interviews. I don't even know. She might have conducted email interviews, but I think it was all just research with Koji Kondo and how he approached writing this because he had a lot more technology available to him with Super Mario Bros. 3 than he did in the previous games. Even going into like how, Super Mario Bros. USA is a reskin of Doki Doki Panic, but Miyamoto is actually really involved to the point where he considers it a Mario game. Not Doki Doki Panic, but Mario Bros. 2 USA.
And just in case for those that don't know, Mario Bros. 2 in Japan is what in the United States is referred to as the Lost Levels, which was just kind of like the first Mario Brothers, but harder.
But abusive.
Like unforgivably hard. Like it's like Dark Souls Mario. No.
I mean, no, yeah, it is. I mean, and abusive. I don't mean that. I don't use that word lightly. Like there's a big jump and they deliberately put invisible blocks you otherwise wouldn't know were there above you so that you'd hit them and die. Like, die. Yeah. It's a dick move, dude. But yeah, it's a good book, and I'm interested to dive into Mega Man 3's book as well. I have actually started into it, but the beginning of the book seems to be actually just a really deep dive into the history of the Mega Man series up until Mega Man 3. So we haven't gotten into the game itself yet, but it's going to be a fun time. Again, I think more recent books that have come out have actually been more engaging, more not educational is the wrong word, but more like, it's adding to my knowledge so I can participate more in the discourse. Where it's just like, this is confirming what I know about Super Mario Bros. 3.
Yeah, and I think that it is probably as a publisher, that we're seeing just a trend, in how they're publishing. I mean, one can imagine, when they first started making books, it was kind of like whoever showed up with a good pitch and could turn something around in time. They were like, all right, you're getting a book. Where now they're kind of enough of a name that they probably have, they can say no,
right.
Not to say that anything that they did was necessarily bad, but just, they have enough potential authors wanting to write for them that they could actually kind of curate what their brand means.
Yeah.
Where I suspected, if we were to go and read the first 6 boss fight books one after the other, you'd be like, all right, this is the shotgun approach to publishing.
right.
I mean, that's just my theory. And it's,
You're still developing your pitch, right? For Ultima 4?
Oh yeah, man. I really,
now that you mention it.
Now they mention it, I think about that every now and then. Although there's other people that are writing. Actually, the idea of writing books about video games, I think, is actually becoming much more popular now.
Yeah, totally.
Because I've seen quite a few, people pitching and just talking about books, about video games. Well, I see there's actually one that I follow on Twitter who's writing about the Quest for Glory series. There's, someone actually already did, I think, a 2-part series on Ultima. Although in Italian, if I recall.
Yeah, well, you always got to have a hurdle. Yeah, I'd like to see the boss fight books ethos kind of be used in other nerdy contexts. Like I'd like to see a book series like this about comics or something like that. It'd be really cool. Not to go on a conspiratorial rant yet again, but we're still in the 35th anniversary here. But they've released a bunch of books, boss fight books has, right? I think they might be into the 30s, maybe late 20s, of how many books they produced. Not one, Andrew, not one covers any sort of Metroid game. What is going on here? Why is Nintendo stomping down those who want to express critical investigation and appreciation for the Metroid series? Tell me, where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
I don't know what to tell you.
You're part of the problem. Get out of here.
Am I? I don't know. No, and that's also the other thing is that, I think because of the way they do things, that is, it's not really, it's whoever comes to them, right? I mean, I imagine they probably would love to do a book about Metroid or whatever. It's just that they need someone who's willing to do that work.
Right. And I'm here.
Well, there you go. It's, Dan and Andrew both write our boss fight books.
We'll check back in a year and see how far our pitches have gone.
Yeah. Same. I mean, my pitch has been bubbling for what, 2-3 years now?
Yeah. But what I do like is that they tend to be focusing on either old games or indie games, which I think those are the games that need this kind of documentation more than, Call of Duty 7 or whatever, right?
Well, and there's also, I think there's something different about, I mean, these big games, there's other people doing that kind of stuff about more recent big games, but also there is something about, these older games or these indie games where their impact is different. Like I could believe in doing like a book about the first Assassin's Creed, or something, because that was, maybe that hit a little bit different, but we don't need a book about Assassin's Creed 17, Norway or Bust.
Right. Yes, that's yeah. I'm surprised you remembered that. That's the subtitle.
But it was like, and I mean, I suspect that there may be a day where they have a few of these, like, so especially one where it is something like, like I don't know Call of Duty, right? But like when you have a big series, except it had to start somewhere that kind of like no one maybe would have looked at it and said this is going to become the big thing,
Right.
Like I can imagine, right, when they, like the Assassin's Creed or Uncharted, right? The first Uncharted, like, do you know you're going to make like a bunch of games and, by the way, a movie?
Right.
Like, that you're whatever. So like, who knows? I think
like what adds to that, the importance of that kind of documentation is that, especially a lot of those early Japanese games and a lot of early PC games, like those games, some of those games are not the Mario games or anything like that, but a lot of them are getting lost, right? That we don't.
And people are dying.
And so like, if we can't have the games anymore, like at least we have this document that examines it, that may, like you said, gets these people's voices on record. Especially in the case of Japanese games where like companies forced them to use pseudonyms in the credits, for Christ's sakes. It's like, it's nice to actually turn to these people and go like, okay, what do you have to say about this game you worked on 30 years ago?
Wait, is that actually a thing?
Oh, yes.
I was, because some of those names really didn't sound real.
No. In order to, it was actually in the 80s in Japan, like headhunting was a real problem. And so like, in terms of like, so they would, and also the company line was to create a sense of, unity amongst the crews. Like we're not individual rock stars making these games. We're all a team, so we don't need our names in there. Just come up with a fake name. So yeah, but mostly from what I read, actually I think that was in the beginning, talked about in the beginning of the Mega Man 3 book that I was reading, that they and I've read it elsewhere, that they came up with pseudonyms to keep people from being sniped by other developers.
Every time you talk about a boss fight book, I remember fondly the one or two that I've read. I know I read Final Fantasy V. I think I've read another one. And I always dust off my Kindle and like, all right, here's a chance. Like the Final Fantasy V one, I said when we talked about it, like literally it was discussing moments that I had experienced. He jokes about the fog level.
Right.
Which is a feature that only existed on Super Nintendo emulators in the early 2000s, right? Except that it wasn't just me. Like a lot of people had that problem. So like to have someone write about that from a perspective of someone who didn't know what it was, but got asked questions, it was just, not only was the book interesting to get perspective on the game, but also the personal side also felt personal for me, which I think is why I really enjoyed the book, because it was relatable, and I probably won't relate to all of them,
Mm-hmm. Right. It's okay to what do you call it? Like cherry pick these books. You don't have to read all of them.
But it was just, and that's why like some of the ones I like Silent Hill 2 is one that I've had. It's probably the one I want to do next because that was a game that I played and it, for various reasons, it shocked me, and in a good way. Like it was like, wow, this was the first time like a horror video game really made me like made me afraid. You know, like gave me like, I mean, like that's well. Anyway, when I read the book, we'll get back to it.
There we go. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page of this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media, such as Twitter and Instagram, where you can find us our respective handles, which means you can find on Twitter, Andrew at ProfoundDark, and find me at dbethel. On Instagram, you can find Andrew at ProfoundBrick, and me and my work at dbethelcomics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 by attribution license. I should make a correction. I think last week I said 5.0. I don't think there is a 5.0 yet, but...
That's you from the future.
Yeah, I know, apparently. So it's 4.0.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcast app or Spotify. What help us out even more would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric. Either way will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Speaking of video games, there's big news in the world of video games this last week, Andrew. You've heard of the Hugo Awards. I think we might have even talked about them back during the Sad Puppy movement.
Yeah. Hugo, which is named after Hugo Gernsback. Basically a science fiction fantasy award. That's science fiction? Or is it sci-fi fantasy? I don't know.
I think it might just be sci-fi.
It may just be sci-fi. Well, I mean, he was an editor for I forget what magazine, but either way, it's an award. It's a award that was always kind of respected. It did get kind of run afoul because the nominations have a certain public facing component. So that's why Chuck Tingle is the twice Hugo Award nominated author because people thought it'd be funny instead of letting a woman or a person of color be nominated. Get the guy that writes cheap porn.
Do you know any of those titles off the top of your head?
What the ones he was nominated for? No, I don't.
Actually, I just meant any Chuck Tingle title.
I mean, his tingles are always great.
I mean, you could probably just make it up. It's basically Mad Lib.
Yeah, I know. I mean, pounded in the ass by my pounded in the butt by my fear of being pounded in the butt. My lesbian jet ski gets me off.
He should create a new. He should create a line of books where he's just writing about specific video games. He calls them boss fuck books. But the big news is that a video game has finally won a Hugo Award. The game. Actually, this proves that it's a sci-fi fantasy award because the game Hades by Supergiant Games, the creators of Bastion and Transistor and Pyre, before won the very first award in the inaugural video game category for the Hugo. So congratulations to Supergiant Games and Hades. It went up against games like Spiritfarer, a wonderful game if I do say so myself, The Last of Us 2, Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and BlazBall, which I've heard about and sounds like a clusterfuck. So video games, now official sci-fi fantasy winners. That's great. Good for them. And Supergiant Games is good.
Yeah, no, Hades is I'm not good at it, but it's fun.
Actually, before we go out, Andrew, we have a short announcement for our dear listeners.
We do. So this is exciting. It's actually, I don't know if it's a first.
I think it is a first.
Because we kind of sort of did this in the first year, although we actually still put stuff out.
We did shortcasts.
We're going to take a week off.
What?
So yeah, so next week there won't be an episode. So there will be no last week of December. I guess that means there'll be no final December. This is the last podcast of December.
This is the last podcast of 2021.
Of 2021 is what I meant to say.
Good riddance.
Yeah, and that's so. You know what? We're going to take a week off to curse this year away.
And you know what, dear listeners, you should too. So so until 2022, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. I don't think Jesus had anything to do with it. That was the Captain Lou Albano, sir.
Same dude.
I'm gonna go pee real bad.
You're gonna pee poorly? Just all over the walls and shit. See you on the other side.